Welcome to Being the Genuine Athlete podcast, where we inspire those who aim for excellence in life and want to understand the how and what it takes to be a champion in life. My name is Jure Koschak. My purpose, dedication, and commitment is to activate your potential, that you understand the ego through your sport and life situations. So I share and give you the tools to be just this, the genuine athlete. Are you ready to tune in? Hello, dear listeners and viewers of the podcast of Being the Genuine Athlete. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Lodro Rinzler. Have I pronounced this good? Great. Hello,
Yes.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. It's really nice to be here.
Yes, and I would like to read because you are really a meditation practitioner and a teacher in Shambhala Buddhist lineage. Can you say something in short version about that?
Sure. So I was born and raised in that particular tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, and I've studied Tibetan Buddhism since I was the age of 6. My parents found me meditating at that age, and they very much were like, well, we'll come back to him later. And over dinner, they said, what was that thing that you were doing? I said, I was meditating. And they said, what does that mean to you? Because obviously, they'd been doing it for many years. And I said, well, I was just sort of being there with the breath. And then when I got distracted, I would come back to the breath. And they said, yeah, that's basically it. So I started doing more and more meditation retreats when I was in my preteens and then teenage years, and spent a very brief stint as a monastic. When I was 17, realized that was not necessarily the path for me at that point, and came back, went to university, started a small meditation group. And it was at that point that some of the teachers I was importing to lead meditation for that group turned to me and said, I think they were just tired of doing it themselves and making the commute. But they said, you've done all the prerequisites for teacher training. It's time for you to go and do this thing. So I got trained up as a meditation instructor very early on. I was 18, and then I've been teaching now for 20 years. At this point, primarily in what's known as the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And I continue to study with Nyingma teachers and to teach to a wide community. Of course, in the last year or so of the pandemic, it's been primarily online. And a lot of people work with me for long programs, 5-6 month Buddhist immersion programs and things like that, everywhere in the world, which is really amazing that we have that opportunity.
Great. You're also an award-winning author of 7 books. You have a bestseller, The Buddha Walks into a Bar, and a new book, which we'll put more attention to, Take Back Your Mind. You're also the co-founder of MNDFL Meditation Studios in New York City. So you have taught meditation, as you mentioned, through a lot of years. You've done it yourself as a child already, since being a kid. You have spoken across the world at different conferences for big companies, universities, businesses, and White House even, as I've seen. So you have been named also one of the 50 innovators shaping the future of wellness. And your work has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Atlantic, Good Morning America, CBS, NBC. So a lot of different things. I am amazed, and I'm very grateful for you being here with us so that athletes can also wrap their minds about meditation, and someone as you, looking like Ed Sheeran, maybe, it's a joke. Just a joke, and meditating, being a Buddha-like. So let's dive right into it. Can you please explain some of the examples that you've encountered through many of your teachings and talks and experiences that you've gathered regarding how people cope and in which challenges do they find themselves? Because just a hint, athletes are procrastinating, they are tired, they're exhausted, they are full of their mind with this COVID now, with full of tests. Some have done more than 200 tests in a year. It's the changes that are coming now are completely shattering their worlds. So I'm very sure you found a lot of people inside of certain situations that they were just stressed and completely contracted.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should even start with what goes well for athletes, and then we can get into all the things that go not so well for them. Because even as you were saying that, what occurred to me, in my I did not grow up considering myself particularly athletic, and then maybe even just, I'm 38 now, my mid 30s, early 30s, I started noticing the decline in my own body, and I said I've got to start doing something, starting with running, boxing. And these days, I did the thing that I literally in one of my books said I would never do, which is CrossFit. So, I'm not competitive in any way, as of course, except with myself to some degree. But I do know within these various three things that I mentioned, three modalities, that you use two words in the title of this thing, athlete and genuine. And it's impossible to not be present when we are actually engaged in the endeavor. We're not overthinking the thing. We're not putting the weights on. We're not, saying, well, what if they come at me from this angle? Like, we're just there. We are present. If we're not present, we get punched in the gut. We lift too much and we hurt ourselves. We do all the things that we shouldn't be doing. So there's some sort of onus here for us to be present. And what happens when we are present? We are our most genuine selves. And, that is a lot of what I talk about in my books around when we are just with the body breathing, and that's in this case in the form of meditation. That's a moment that we are just saying, oh, in this moment, I am okay. I am genuinely who I am, and who I am is good enough and whole enough and complete enough as is. This is a major discovery that often comes in the early time of meditation. So already there's sort of synchronicity here of that sense of genuineness that you talk about even in the title of this thing. So that's the thing that I sort of want to start us off at. Like, let's be real. Like, there are times where we know how to be present. There are times that we're just fully in the body as athletes. And that can then be cultivated more in meditation. Like, we sort of train the mind deeper in that direction. So going back to the meditation thing, the question you actually asked me about, where does it all go wrong? And what do people deal with and have to cope with? I think the interesting thing there is more around that notion of, when we're meditating, we drift off into thought a lot. And that's just natural. It happens to literally every human being in the world. This is not, everyone thinks it's their problem, that they're bad at it when they sit down to meditate. That's not true. But everyone drifts off in thought. We keep coming back over and over again, and we keep returning to the physical moment of the present through connecting once more to the breath. We acknowledge the thought, the story that we're telling ourselves, and we come back to the breath, and we do that over and over and over again. And then when we go into our post-meditation experience, i.e. the rest of our waking hours, we have then trained the mind in the same way that we train the body to do a certain thing. When I first started doing CrossFit, for example, I remember so clearly my trainer at the time, Nolan, he said, I said, it's awkward when I do this sort of deadlift. He goes, how often have you done that? I said, 3-5 times in my life, right? He goes, why would that feel normal to you then? And it's the same thing with meditation. It's like, at first it feels awkward. There's so many thoughts, but then we start training the mind in that direction. It becomes a second skill set to just acknowledge the thought to come back to the breath. And then in our post-meditation experience, our other waking hours, we notice that we're getting pulled into all of those things that you talked about: doubt, procrastination, fear. What if it goes this way? What if it goes that way? We acknowledge the thought, we naturally come back into our body once more because we've been training the mind in that direction. It becomes easier to do over time. So this is the big sort of connection for me between these two areas, where there's something brilliant of, we all know what it means to train the body. Now we just are training the mind. And to train the mind, actually, then it reinforces us as better athletes, because we are no longer as interested in the thought that says, you can't do this. We're not interested in the thought that says, what if this goes wrong? What if this goes that way? We just let those thoughts go. We are in the body, and we actually can make better decisions from there.
Yeah, great that you mentioned this, the last bit, and of course, everything else as well. Because me, as an athlete, being an athlete so many years ago, a professional athlete, I was just training. I was doing everything. Of course, I read books about confidence. I did some yoga. I did some this. I did research. But once I had won, I said, oh, I got it now. I'm the winner. And then the crisis came. And I was once again down in my inside hell, in my monkey mind. And a lot of these athletes are coping with the same thing. They're training, they're spitting blood, they're training physically also mentally on some level. They're training emotionally, they're training in their tactic, but then they lose. Or then something happens, or then partner maybe says something, parents, coach, agent, car breaks down, and they see that they haven't trained everything. And as I have in my own experience, I needed a couple of situations that I was opened, that I opened my mind. Some athletes need more than a couple of situations. Some need to get really injured. So why do you think that this hero's journey in some people is so devastating, is so traumatic? Because I am all for prevention. Why wouldn't we be open and have that education that we could prevent a certain broken leg or certain defeat that is so devastating? We could cope it priorly to that. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting thing because it's sort of like a zero-sum game where we get the thing or we don't get the thing. And, you know, for any of us, it could be in our work, we get the promotion, we don't get the promotion. We get the romantic partner we want, we don't get the romantic partner. When it comes to these sorts of things, I mean, I mentioned earlier that the best competition for me is with myself. And even then, it's sort of a loose one. And I understand that there are people who do this professionally and so on and so forth. But there's something like when this is very, I'm leaving like just the world of meditation and diving real deep into Buddhist philosophy here, that the root of a lot of our pain and suffering, according to that tradition, is that we get really lost in fixed expectations. If it goes this way and it goes in my favor, then I'm going to be really happy and then I'm going to feel good. And in your own experience, you sort of highlighted the danger there, which is we get the thing and then we want something else. And that we are now have other fixed expectations about what it should look like, what we want next, and so on and so forth. I remember when I was a child, Christmas was rolling around, which we don't have to get into the weird politics of the Buddhists celebrating Christmas right now. But, you know, I was training my mom and I said, you know what, when I get what I want, I feel like I'm just going to want something else after that. And she goes, Christ, you know, like this is, what do I have this Buddhist kid for? And it's that mentality of like the kid that opens the present that says, but I want something more now. But we just continue on with that into our adulthood, whether that is, again, a new eye product, a new job opportunity, any number of things, or this very specific accomplishment. Because what you said can go one of two ways. I get the award, I finish first in the competition, in which case you've hit the goal and then you say, well, I think there's this other competition that I can now compete in and I can go further. Or I don't, and I feel bad about myself. In either way, we're sort of holding ourselves in a state of suffering. So this is, you know, again, it's not wholly weird Buddhist stuff. I think it's pretty straightforward life stuff, that there's a distinction between goals and intentions. A goal is, I need to get that specific thing and then I'll be happy. And if we get that specific thing, we may find that we are not so happy, we want to move on to another thing. Or an intention. An intention is more about like, who do we want to be and how do we want to show up? And I think that's something that some of the athletes I value most, you know, I'm thinking of some of the coaches over my gym, the Rower, CrossFit, and Hudson, they are just deeply interested in bettering themselves, as you said, holistically. And that includes the qualities within themselves. They lift what they lift and they can do it. And sometimes as we get older, we can do less and so on and so forth. We're not as able to do things. That's part of life. But who are we along the way? That's the interesting thing to me. Are we the person that cares for others? Are we the person that is kind? Are we loving? Are we generous? Are we cultivating those qualities? Because those are intentions that we can have. We can lift what we lift. We can compete and win or lose. But those are things that are actually not dependent on external circumstances. They're dependent on who we are and the way that we're working with our mind throughout that whole process. That's something entirely within our control. It's only us that holds us in stress. So this new book that I did, Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice for what did I call it? Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice for Modern Times. It's about that. It's like, how do we take back the mind? Because the mind could run rampant with stories. And many of us think these things are happening to us without realizing that we have a choice within our own mind of how we want to treat ourselves, what qualities we want to cultivate, and how we can move our own life in a positive direction, whether the external circumstances align or not.
Okay, yeah, running mind, monkey mind, emotions. I just had a client wrote to me, something happened with his car, and he's like, I'm devastated or something. I'm angry, frustrated. Why does it always happen? And I said, well, look, it happened. So now is more important. What can you learn from it? How can you become someone? Well, who do you need to become to understand this? And why are you still clinging to this car that breaks down, that it's like devouring your wallet in a way, your bank account? How can you flip the coin in here? So this is all, as you said, the choice, the consciousness. Can you explain dharma, karma, and does it connect actually with what we're talking about? These two terms.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to wax philosophical and deep Buddhist philosophy here, but the Buddha's teachings were known as Dharma, and Dharma just means the truth of things as they are. It's like he's like, let me just point out some things. Like, for example, things are impermanent, and it's sort of hard to argue with him. So a lot of Buddhism is professor I admire dearly, Professor Robert Thurman, is fond these days of saying Buddhism is realism. It's like, how much can we just be with our reality as it is? That's what the practice is about. So enlightenment is us just being with reality as it is to the fullest extent. Just being here, really openly, without our fixed opinions or fixed ideas, all of those sort of negative thoughts that we talked about before clogging up the works. That's what we're aspiring to. And that's not far-fetched. That's not weird and religious. That's just something that we probably want to do. So does someone have to become a Buddhist to meditate? Of course not. No one has to become Buddhist to work with their mind. But even if, like, people who a number of meditation students who've worked with me for many, many years, at some point they say, I want to officially become Buddhist, and there's things that they could do to do that. But it's akin to getting married. When my wife and I were deciding to get married, my aunt took us aside, she tried to talk us out of it because she had spent her lifetime with a partner. They had never gotten married. They were very happy. They were, until he passed away, they lived probably the couple I looked up to the most. And she's like, you don't have to do this. And we did, and we were happy to do it. But it was one of those things of, you could be Buddhist all your life, but there is something about saying, yeah, you know what, I'm actually going to pursue this in earnest. I'm going to, have a particular time that I'm saying, like, I am going to follow in this tradition and things like that. And saying that in front of people might be meaningful to you, but you don't got to do it in order to do any of those things. Same thing. I hope that analogy makes sense, because, in the same way my wife and I could have spent the rest of our lives together not getting married, it's the same thing. So no one has to become Buddhist. No one has to get married in order to have a great relationship. You don't have to become Buddhist to work with your mind. You can just work with your mind over the course of your lifetime and see incredible results.
Amazing. Yeah. Let's touch, before we go into technology and some fun stuff, let's touch what is meditation. And I want to tell an anecdote. I was with my girlfriend in New York in the US Open, and we did a conference with athletes, with tennis community, on how we work, what's our intention and purpose of teaching children. So we were present at a conference that Fernandez, she was the first singles and doubles lady. She won gold medal, Grand Slams, gold medal in Olympics, Grand Slams won. And she said a story. Back in the 90s, Martina Navratilova, who won zillion of Grand Slams and Wimbledons, she told her, let's meditate, because they were playing doubles together. Fernandez started to meditate. And that year, she won every tournament. And that was in 2018 that she told that story. And she said, but then I sort of stopped meditating. And I'm like, why? Because meditation brought you so many good things, not only winning, because you become a different person. You are holistic. It's not just the consequence, the results. You are feeling, you are on a bigger, higher level of understanding of life. So what is meditation in your explanation, in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love that, because you hear all these stories. I feel like often in the sports world, you hear like, why did you all of a sudden start taking home all the cups? Why did you start winning all the championships? And they're like, well, I started meditating. It's great PR. But, I think, the important thing is, like, I started working with my mind in a different way. That's a really important part of any, I think, athletic competition, any sports that we're doing. And there's any number of ways to do that. But meditation is particularly potent because it's been around for thousands of years and it's time tested. And I actually sort of want to start there, because when we talk about meditation in the West, we're often talking about one of two things. It's stemming either from the Vedic tradition or from the Buddhist tradition. There are some outliers there, but within the Vedic tradition, we have things like, people might have heard transcendental meditation, has stemmed out of that. There are Vedic teachers. There are all sorts of yogic techniques. And then on the Buddhist side, we often think of it as mindfulness meditation. It goes by other names in other traditions, shamatha in Tibetan traditions, zazen and Zen traditions. So there's all sorts of names for it, but that's one of the key practices of Buddhism, alongside some heart practices like loving kindness. Other compassion practices are out there, but it's like those are the two major camps. And then there's all sorts of things these days. There's also Kundalini meditation. I have friends in the Jewish tradition. They have for Jewish meditation. There's many, many forms of meditation. So it's sort of a catch-all phrase for something that I think is best defined as substituting our discursive thinking and the stories we tell ourselves for another object of our attention. So if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do later, and what time do I need to leave to get to that thing, and so on and so forth, that's the discursive thinking. If I'm sitting here and I acknowledge that, and I say, no, I'm going to come back to sipping my juice, being with the breath, whatever it is, this can be like, oh, there's a repeated placement on another object. I am now entering into the realm of meditation. The breath is a great object of meditation, this mindfulness of the breath practice, because it's always with us. We don't need any bells and whistles. We don't need special music. We don't need the perfect environment. We don't need to have a particular mala, it's sort of a rosary looking thing. We can just be with our body breathing. The breath is always with us. It's always fresh. It's always able to bring us into the present moment. So it's an excellent object of our attention for our meditation. So that's sort of the classic definition, substituting all those discursive thoughts for repeated placement on another object of our attention. Mindfulness is a very popular phrase, which often can be thought of as being present to what's currently occurring without judgment. So in other words, if I'm mindful of the breath, I'm present with it, and I'm not judging myself for sometimes getting lost. I'm not judging whether it should be deeper or shallower. I'm just there with it. And that's a really beautiful skill set. So the more I train in something like mindfulness meditation, the more when I'm with a difficult family member and they're having a hard time, the more I can train to be mindful with them. So it's something I can actively engage in, a skill set I now have cultivated that I can apply to my life. I can be present for them without judgment in that difficult time. So that's sort of both the definition of meditation and specifically mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, why it's good to train that.
Yeah, breath. Yeah, breath through nose and calming down. That's what brought me into a completely different through a portal to different dimensions of life. When I experienced, my first experience with meditation was a book called Meditation. It was a small book, and I read it needs to be a dark room and quiet. And I made my room dark in the middle of the day, and everything was quiet. I was like, so what now? I was, I think, 16, 17 years of age. I hadn't experienced it before. But what happens is that, so the example, athletes escape their feelings, emotions. They don't want to confront feelings that are not good after being tired, after losing, after winning even. So you escape with certain substances or even technology like video games and social media and everything. So combine the answer, because all athletes, while escaping, they want to have fun. Nothing wrong with pursuing fun. But while you pursue it from escapism or like not confronting, is a different outcome afterwards. So I experienced, after meditating and really digging into myself and elevating the level, the amount of fun, the amount of liveliness that was surrounding me all of a sudden shifted so much that I couldn't compare with prior living, like shoving everything under the rug and escaping, and afterwards like really sitting, like you said now, getting that attention from some distraction or from something into breath, into your body, into yourself, and then after consequently being full-grown soulful being. And that is fun for me. So how can you compare this mindful technology and using technology mindfully and fun? What is fun with it? What is fun with this bridging the gap with meditation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I also, I understand that avoidant thing that you're talking about too. I don't like how I'm feeling at this point, so I'm going to avoid it with as you said, video games, online shopping, binge watching Netflix, anything that, I mean, I don't want to blame technology, and I'll come back to that in a second, but for some people, maybe not necessarily all athletes, but some people could, as you say, be drugs, it could be drink, it could be something, it could be eating a lot of carbs. Any number of things that says, well, I want to escape the present moment. I don't want to look at how I'm feeling. I guess my question to those people would then be, how is that working out for you? Because, I mean, trust me, I've gone down these roads myself. I have made any number of good mistakes and bad mistakes along the way. But the interesting thing I've seen, not just in my own experience, but lots of meditation students, is that they often will try anything. And then because not even anything, they'll try everything. They will try everything. And then they'll be like, well, none of this seems to have worked. I might as well try meditation, dealing with myself, because we can't outrun who we are. We can't outrun ourselves. The flip side of this is that inherently, at least according to the Buddhist tradition / my own personal experience / the experience of not only the teachers I have studied with, but the students I have worked with, is that when we are able to do a little bit of it, and we drop just a little bit below that surface layer of the things that we want to avoid, we find that what's there is not a horrible, pitiful person, is that we're actually inherently okay, good, whole, complete as is. That's just the discovery. In the Buddhist tradition, we call this Buddha nature, awake nature, that we're inherently awake. That's who we are. We just got to let go of some of those thoughts that hold us back from that. That's the whole thing. We acknowledge the thought, we let it go, we come back. What do we discover? I'm okay in this moment. I'm able to rest. I'm able to be with the body breathing. So there's something very powerful about when we stop avoiding ourselves, when we stop trying to numb out, we might discover that there's something really wonderful to work from. And this is probably a better foundation for many of us, not only working with the mind, but working with the body, to come at it from a sense of wholeness and completeness as is, as opposed to needing to level up, fix, or change who we are fundamentally. On the technology side, I think technology is essentially a tool, not unlike any others, not to be macabre, but, if I had a hammer here, I could use a hammer to put a little nail in the wall and hang up a beautiful piece of art. I could use a hammer to break all of my stuff. The hammer is not the problem. My intention and my ability to wield the hammer is the problem. Same thing with our mind, same thing with technology. So the technology we engage in, I mean, here we are connecting in different parts of the world, able to record. Hopefully this is able to then be listened to people. Other people can listen to it from other parts of the world and it helps them. That's all incredible use of technology. It's so wonderful that we have that. And we can, if we're not conscious of how we want to engage in our life and our world, end up using technology, as you said, to numb out. So it's just becoming a little bit clearer about our intention. So it's a bit of a 3-step process in my mind: intention, action, and then fruition. So the intention or view that we take, why am I doing this thing? Why am I clicking over to Facebook right now? Is it because I'm trying to distract myself from how I'm feeling, because I don't want to deal with my work situation? Is it because I haven't caught up with my friend? I wonder how they're doing. I haven't heard from them recently. Those are 2 very different intentions right there, and they will lead you down different roads. The I just want to distract myself road might end up with us scrolling endlessly. Half hour has gone by. The intentional road of, I just want to see how they're doing. We end up feeling uplifted. We reach out to them again. They reach back out. We end up connecting. And that's where we get to the fruition. How do we feel after? Most people, after endlessly scrolling on social media, they feel drained. They don't feel good about it. If that's the case, then we say, I don't want to do that again. Maybe I can look at that and come at it with a different intention next time. Or we've done the thing that we wanted to do and we feel good about it. We've reconnected with our friend. We might feel very uplifted. So again, I think that sort of 3-step process of looking at the intention behind what we're doing, whether it is social media, whipping out our phone at an intersection, any number of ways that we might engage with technology. Why are we doing what we're doing? And then the activity, the action. Can we show up and be present for it? Can we follow through on that intention? And then the fruition. If we do so, we might feel uplifted. If we do not, we may feel drained. And then we learn from that experience. And then we can refine our relationship over time from there.
Great. Yeah. And I've seen many athletes finding their ways, finding themselves through different adversities, challenges, of course. I've even interviewed some, had podcasts with some. They've gone through their hero's journey. They've gathered these thoughts and understood everything that you mentioned now. And this is my intention, because athletes have a voice, and you've written 7 books. So how can you explain or give some guidance, some hint points to athletes that are going through something? Like, I know journaling, even recording your own voice is beneficial. Talking to someone, of course, maybe recording it, because all these biggest adversities and challenges are the fruition, are like the seed of your main success, becoming that whole person. And a lot of athletes have already written amazing books already in the middle of their career, like Djokovic, who's meditating, and Navratilova and Agassi, tennis players, and many other, of course, athletes from other sports, not mentioned. So what's your suggestion and instruction regarding writing books already in the middle of it?
Yeah, I guess maybe just 2 small pieces here. One would be an adage that I first learned from a colleague, Yael Shai, and I often share with people when I lead mindfulness teacher trainings myself. I always offer this advice to them. I think it's applicable here, which is to speak from the scar, not the wound. And what that means is, we are speaking from what we have learned from some of the things we have gone through, not venting and vomiting our current experience of something that we're still trying to figure out. So it's often we have to be at the other end of the tunnel, so to speak, in order to actually share the wisdom that comes out of these things. So to speak from something, particularly if it is pain, that has scarred over. I'll give an example. At this point in my life, I can speak very openly about meditation and how it helped me through an incredibly difficult time when my father passed away in 2013, and how that did really throw me for a loop. If I started teaching on that or writing about that now, or back then, 2013, it would not have been clean. It would have been venty, like I would have been venting. It wouldn't, there's no lesson to have been learned at that point. Many years later, hopefully a little bit older and wiser, I think there's real clarity for me about how the meditation practice allowed me to not exit mentally, to go back to what we were just talking about, and to just be fully present, even in the midst of a very painful situation. And what a gift that was, to actually not mentally check out for that important time in both of our lives, and to really be present and open with one another. So in retrospect, that's me speaking from a scar. That wound that was so big has scarred over. It's not that it's gone. It's not that it never happened. It had happened. There's a scar there, and I can talk about that scar in a way that might actually, maybe someone's listening to this right now and say, oh, maybe I should start meditating. Hopefully it's helping people. So I think that sort of thing, like not saying, well, here's what I'm going through. It's like, here's what I've gone through, and here's what I have to offer in terms of wisdom from it, can be very powerful. And that brings me to the second point, which is to write in a way that helps people. And I actually, I think it's so interesting. I know I keep harping on the wonderful people over at Railroad CrossFit, but, the owner and coach there, Sean McQueen, he started a blog during this pandemic. He started writing just about his own, started with basic tips for athletes, very helpful stuff, great. And he started writing about his own experience, and it was like, there's the juice. Because it was always stuff that he's like, here's something from a decade prior that I went through and what I learned and how it actually relates to how I work out now. And I was like, that is really juicy. And I think that sort of story of like, we've all gone through the ringer. There's maybe an 18-year-old right now who's like, I haven't lived very much. He's like, you just went through a pandemic. We've all gone through the ringer at this point. What can we ultimately learn from some of the pain that happens in our life? What can we learn from some of the difficult circumstances that occur just naturally as part of life? How can we use that knowledge to then help others is the interesting question to me. Not to just heal ourselves, but to actually really say, here's the wisdom that comes out of these things. Here's what you can learn as well.
Yes, sharing the wisdom, sharing the experience. Great that you mentioned after the wounding has healed, the scar is there, and how to come out of it, writing in a way that helps people. Yes, thank you very much for that. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to wrap up our conversation with?
No, I think this has been so lovely. And I think the idea of this genuine heart, the genuine heart can be cultivated through the exercise itself, the competitions that we're a part of, and so on and so forth. But I think to work with the mind, in Buddhism, there's not a big distinction in the mind-heart connection there. It's sort of one thing here. To work with the mind is to work with the heart. To work with the heart is to work with the mind. And I think that is an important part of anyone who wants to do the work that you're so beautifully talking about in this series. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing. And I greatly appreciate hearing from anyone who wants to continue this conversation. The nice thing about having a name like Lodro Rinzler is that you get to own all the domain names and Instagram handles and things like that. So people are always welcome to reach out to me if they would like to continue to talk.
Yes, I'll post the pages as well, your personal page and your Instagram and your books. So the new book is, the title?
It's Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice for Anxious Times.
Anxious times, yes, take back your mind and your heart, and let's go forward in this new age. Thank you very much, Lodro. It's been amazing to talk to you. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Follow me on Being the Genuine Athlete Instagram and Facebook page. Share, like, and comment, and be genuine all the way.